What's up, amigos? We're back with the Prodigy Maker Show, episode 63. It's yours truly, Chris Lewitt. We're talking about technique and tactics and junior high performance tennis training. It's good to be back with you guys. I've been away on vacation and now I'm getting back into work mode. I haven't been on the tennis court in a while, so I'm a little grumpy. I need to be on the tennis court every day to be happy, I think. So I'm looking forward to getting back on the court very soon. Today's show is about, I call them dinosaur techniques and tactics, or dinosaur methods of teaching, basically outdated techniques and tactics that need to go extinct, I think, very quickly, hopefully. But it doesn't seem to be happening that way. There are still so many techniques and tactics that I see out in the coaching world that are inefficient, ineffective, and outdated. And I just wish coaches would stop teaching these things to the kids out there, because at the end of the day, I want all those aspiring young kids with big dreams to have success and to reach their full potential. That's why you get into coaching, I think. You get into coaching to help kids reach their highest level, to try to extract greatness from the students that you have, the kids that you work with. And unfortunately, there's a lot of teaching techniques out there that are holding kids back, that I'm seeing a lot, especially just finishing summer camp. It's driving me crazy how like I have these pet peeves that I just keep seeing seasonally every year, and I'm just kind of tired of it. So I thought I'd throw that out there, throw those ideas out there to you guys and see if you agree or disagree. Some of them may be more controversial than others. I just think a lot of the way that we teach tennis, at least I know this country best. Obviously, I know Spain very well. But a lot of the technique, especially on the technical side, the things that we teach children are just old school and not really on the cutting edge. So I'd like to talk about that today. Little house cleaning first, little housekeeping, things that are coming up for me. I'm getting back to work in the New York City area on Sunday, this Sunday, which is the 21st, I believe. 21st or the 20th. I think 21st. So if you are in the New York City area and you're looking to train on the court with me, hit me up with text message me and we'll try to set up a time. If it's raining, we'll be at our new Greenwich facility where I'll be coaching all year. So I'll be just across the border of New York in Greenwich, indoors, the indoor clay, which is great to have. And if it's outdoors, we may do something in Westchester, just north of the city. So if you're in that area or you're not too far a drive from there, hit me up with a text message and we'll try to set up a time to train. I know some people are still away, but I'm looking to get back on the court. I've had my vacation and I'm ready to work. Also, we are training here in Vermont at the club. We are training all week, Monday through Friday. I know a bunch of good players are coming starting this Monday. So if you want to train more full time and you are able to come to the club here, to the academy here in Vermont, just outside of Manchester, Vermont, please let me know and we'll try to arrange that. And that's every week. We train every week, Monday through Friday, about 4 or 5 hours a day of tennis and then optional fitness. So you're welcome to join for that. I'm working really hard right now. I'm trying to get, now that the summer camp is finished, I'm trying to get the online school growing. I feel, to be honest, that the online school, which is located at clta.teachable.com, CLTA, like the Chris Lewitt Tennis Academy.teachable.com, I think the content there is really amazing, and I can't believe I think it should be more popular than it is. We have some diehard fans who of the show and of my coaching who have bought a lot of those courses and you are using them with their students. But I was just looking at, I haven't looked at it in that much because I've been busy coaching, but with the summer camp, and I was like, these courses are really good. and they're not very expensive, and they really share my philosophy and methodology. I think I've been busy with other projects and I haven't really promoted the school enough, the online courses that we have, but they're really good and they're not expensive and they're high quality information. And for those of you who are not able to train with me personally, I think they're just a great way to learn about, my perspective, my philosophy, and my methodology. And we'll be adding more courses this year, and I'll try to get the word out. I'm not very good with marketing. We try to keep it real. Don't do a lot of marketing. And certainly haven't marketed that online school very much at all. And I just think I was looking at like the number of students that we have online, and I was like, man, this thing should be blowing up because the content is good, the information is really good, and it's not very expensive. So I think it's a good option for people who are far away from the northeastern United States, whether you're international or you're far away in the country. What else? I have some DVDs coming out. I'm kind of excited about that. We're doing the filming September 16th, so there'll be some processing and post production on that, but they should be out sometime probably 2023. I know we have 4 DVDs that are in the works. One of them is on the return of serve. One of them is on the transition and volley game, which should be interesting for you guys. And obviously, I've mentioned to you the books are a work in progress. We're still shooting for 2023, probably first quarter or second quarter of 2023 publishing date for the new Secrets of Spanish Tennis. So the book's been very popular, but I was looking back and it was published in 2014, so it's starting to get a little old, outdated, like what we're talking about today. So I've already started writing the new chapters for the book. I'm excited about the Secrets of Spanish Tennis 2, SOST 2. A lot of you guys who are fans of the show have asked for me to do some Q&A at the end. So if you have, just a reminder, if you have a question, like a junior development question or a technique question or a question on Spanish tennis, just send me an email to chrislewitt@gmail.com, chrislewitt@gmail.com, and I will start to incorporate the email grab bag that sometimes we do on the program. You can send me any junior development questions to my email, and I will try to answer them on an upcoming show. And that's a good way for me to go in depth on important questions that you have, and also share those with the community that listens and watches the show. So, like for example, I know I had a request to talk about live ball versus dead ball training. So basket training versus training with the live ball. I think that's a really interesting topic. I might actually want to include that in a new program entirely. We could just do a show on that and talk about dead ball versus live ball training, because I think that's a very interesting debate in the tennis coaching world. And we can kind of dig into that more. We can kind of drill down and go deeper into that subject in a future show even. But let me know any questions you have and I'll be happy to answer. That's what this show is all about. Trying to help kids reach their full potential and trying to help especially parents and coaches with any questions that they have to improve their success on the court with their students and their kids. So let's talk about that. What are some of the major pet peeves that I have, the big concerns that I have when I see other coaches in the field, when I visit other clubs, when I run the summer camp, I have players visiting from all over the world, from all over the country, not just from the northeastern U.S. And I get to see a lot. I basically get to evaluate how coaches across the country and internationally are teaching their students. And especially with the American students, I'm very concerned about the technique. I have players who come and I'm always doing technical reconstruction. That's my job. I love to do that. But when you step back and you take a bigger view of what's happening, for me, it raises a big question: is why are coaches teaching techniques that are so old and very traditional when the game has clearly changed? The game has the game of tennis now in 2022, going to be 2023 soon, is dramatically different than it was in the 1960s or 1970s or 1980s. And unfortunately, as you will see as I go through this list, a lot of the techniques that I am seeing, and some tactics as well, are basically from that era. So they're techniques that are very old, that worked in those decades, but are not really appropriate or effective, or they're anachronistic. They don't make sense in today's tennis world, modern world. And but yet they're being taught all over the country. If we just take this country, the U.S., which I know the best, obviously, and I just am kind of tired of seeing the same problems with players who come to me over and over. So I'm going to put those out there to you guys. You may agree or disagree. That's fine. But I know I'm right about a lot of these things. And I know that it keeps me very busy making technical, reconstructing technique, making technical changes, basically saving kids from being relegated to the JV squad. I have a good business doing that, as well as taking kids to the very top of the country, and getting kids to 5-star, becoming a 5-star recruit or blue chip. I love coaching those kids too, but usually those kids don't have a lot of the technical issues that I'm talking about here. I see lots of players who are lower level tournament players, or they want to become a really good varsity player on their high school team, or maybe just improve their ranking, get into the top 50 in the East, or get into the top 20 in the East, to improve their sectional ranking or whatever it is. Maybe they're stuck somewhere. And a lot of these techniques and tactics are common ones that I see that are holding kids back. And I get particularly concerned when I see young kids. I love working with young kids, under 10, under 12. It's some of my favorite ages to work with. And it's just sad when you see like a kid being taught strokes from the 1970s, and you look at your watch and it's 2022, and you look at the television or you look at YouTube and you see the way that people are playing, and you look at the disconnect. There's such a large disconnect between what is being taught in the grassroots at clubs around the country by coaches who maybe have not studied the modern game, with what is happening. The disconnect between what you see that the pros are doing on the professional tours, and I think that disconnect shouldn't be so severe. And that basically I agree with coaches who are teaching young kids more like the way pros play. Now, one caveat is you can't teach kids exactly the same as adult pros, because the difference in physical development is quite large. So there has to be some modifications and adjustments for young children, because their bodies are still growing. They haven't fully matured physically, and that's very important. So I think there has to be, that's an important asterisk when you're training young kids, technically, especially technically, that you can't force them into all of the angles and positions that an adult can do, because it may lead to an injury. And the kids with their young bodies are still developing, so you have to be a little bit careful. But in general, I have to say that young kids can be taught the way you see most of the top pros playing nowadays, especially the next generation of top pros. Try to look at the younger pros coming up, the Casper Ruuds, the Carlos Alcarazes. Look at the next gen players and their techniques, and then that will give you a glimpse of what the future holds. And try to teach the kids more like that. Just basically, you try to look at the modern technique, next generation technique, the way the top pros are doing it, and you try to, with some small modifications, you try to teach that in a systematic way, in a responsible way, to young children, and I've had a lot of success doing that. And I think basically the whole textbook that's being taught to like PTR pros and USPTA. In the US, we have PTR and USPTA, which command the tennis coaching world. I think a lot of what certified coaches in the US are teaching is dead wrong, and completely outdated. If not wrong, then if that's too strong a word, then just say, very, very traditional and completely out of touch with what's happening in the modern world of tennis at the high level. And I think that is a shame. I would love to see the entire curriculum for coaches revamped more along the lines of, starting maybe with eliminating some of the things that I'm saying here. But I've been saying this for years. You can go back in the program and see many shows that I've talked about like myths, busting myths, where I've talked about techniques that are outdated. Especially I spend a lot of time working on technique and biomechanics, and now, even years go by and it's the same. Every year I see the same things being taught. Like, I don't understand. Or do coaches they don't have access to YouTube? They cannot see. They don't watch any professional tennis. They don't watch any clips. Can they even get like something off of socials where they see some slow motion of the way the pros are swinging now? Or maybe, I don't know what is going on. I know that some coaches believe they should teach like classic technique, and then somehow over time the kids will morph into like modern technical players. I know there's a philosophy that believes that. There's like a group of in the coaching world that sort of promote that and believe that. I don't buy that. I think that's not the most efficient way. It's better to just teach modern, modified modern, responsibly, right away, basically at 5, 6 years old. Maybe you can teach a very rudimentary classical techniques to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. But basically, once the kid becomes more serious, I usually start with young kids who are serious, like 5, 6, 7. Like, just go for it. Go teach the kids modern technical form, and don't waste your time with classic traditional stuff that is not the best way to swing anymore, for example, or to move. We're going to talk about movement too. So this, I have a list of 10. You want to get into it, guys? Shoot me any questions you have about teaching techniques or methods. But some of these you may have heard me gripe about, and some of them may be new to you. But these are things that I see every year, seasonally. Every player who comes to visit me from outside of this area of New York or or Vermont or the Northeast, New England. I see it all in New England too. But there are pockets of the country that teach technique, I think, much better, by the way, and some areas that are much worse. So the level of coaching varies around the country. And but I think this goes back to, again, the like USPTA, PTR, the way everyone is certified. I think is probably the whole thing is something's wrong with the way coaches are certified and trained, and this probably relates to like red, orange, green, how players are taught in red and orange. The basic curriculums for the red, orange, green are probably way off. And they're probably contributing to why I see a lot of kids at 9, 10, 11, 12 with major technical, in my opinion, major technical issues that need to be addressed and corrected, which is the opposite of what should happen in the younger years. The younger years, you should get the technique beautifully solid and clean. I talk about cleaning a lot. Cleaning the technique, and it's just a shame. You have all these kids, like I'm a dad. I have 4 kids, and you have all these kids out there across the country. They're all aspiring to be better and better players, and we're giving the majority of them, especially in the US, we're giving the majority of those kids really shoddy skills, like shoddy tools. or outdated tools, very, very ineffective tools. And so, just from a philosophical point of view, it's a shame that these kids kids are not achieving their full potential, writ large. Basically because they don't have very good technique, or they don't have very good movement. They don't. Then they make, and they're being given some questionable tactical advice, just basic things, and I think that's kind of a shame. Why does it have to be like that? If the whole country taught technique and tactics a little better, a little more modern, a little more cutting edge, I'm sure we would have better players. That's not the reason we don't have. That's not the reason at the top level. Like the top level is okay. Those kids usually get the better coaching. But I'm talking more like from a broad base, like all across the country. The young kids at the grassroots level, all those kids could be taught much, much better, and then you have the level of tennis in the whole country would be much, much higher. I'm reminded of maybe how Spain does it, or how France does it. I feel like the level of technique, for example, in France, across the country on a broad-based level, on the grassroots level, you see the way players swing the racket and move is exceptional. It's very, very high. Like I've noticed that from French players. I've had French coaches who work for me, and I've studied in France, not as much as Spain, but I followed that. And in Spain, they're not as technical as in France, but they do a good job, especially with the movement. As you guys know, in Spain, the movement, they teach players to move beautifully and very well. And although they're not as technical as in France, for example, the players, because their movement is really good, if there are some little issues with the swing, it can be worked. You can work with that. But I think because they have such good, all the players around Spain move very well, are taught movement very well, it helps grow the level of the tennis players in that country. But a little different than, excuse me, a little different than in France, where I think they do even a better job with technique, like the swings. But Spain has the whole grassroots, at the grassroots broad-based level, everyone is moving really well, and everyone learns some important. They teach techniques, some important techniques, and how to play the game. In Spain, all the players learn how to play the game very well tactically, I think, in line with the modern game. So you see that in Spain. You see the really good technical base that I'm talking about across the border in France. So if you look to Europe, I think those are sort of the benchmarks for me that I'm comparing when I come back here to the U.S. And why can't we do a better job here? I don't understand. Why in the U.S. do we have to teach in such an old-fashioned way to the majority of kids? It's definitely hurting the level of tennis in this country. So let's talk about it a little bit. I wrote this top 10 list for an article in New York Tennis Magazine. You can check it out if you want the print edition. I think it's either coming out this month, or it came out in the last issue. I think it's due to be published soon. So if you're in the New York area, you can check out this basic list in New York Tennis Magazine, which is a good magazine for the Eastern section. And so the first one, you've heard me talk about it, is with the forehand. And I love to work on the forehand. This is like a Spanish thing in Spain. They're obsessed with developing a forehand weapon, usually with a lot of topspin, unless you're Bautista Agut, maybe. Or very rarely, most of the Spanish players play with really good topspin, with a loose arm, and they generate high RPM and a very quick racket. So as the racket's accelerating to the ball, there's a whippiness, and the racket flies through the air very quickly. So there's a quick acceleration of the racket, and it almost looks like a blur. It does look like a blur. And so when I have young kids, I'm thinking down the road, I want a forehand like that. And Unfortunately, what I see taught to the majority of young children in this country is the opposite of a blur or a whip. I see and the opposite of loose. I see a lot of stiff, uh, blocked, cramped, tight, locked. You can fill in the word the adjective that you'd like to use. Swings. So the swing is very tight, and if you look at the musculature of the arm, so if you're hitting the forehand, if you look carefully, you'll see whether there is tension rippling through that arm. I'm talking from the shoulder down to the lower arm to the wrist. Is there a lot of tension there, or are those segments moving with more elasticity? And that, to me, is the number one most important thing when you're building the forehand. We'll talk about a few other aspects too, but you have like a little kid in front of you, whether it's a red ball player or an orange ball player or whatever ball you're using. The arm needs to be elastic. So the segments of the arm, you have the wrist, the elbow joint, the shoulder joint. Those joints need to be mobile and supple. There has to be a suppleness to the way the arm is moving, and those joints have to be loose when you swing. It's a little tricky because at impact, those joints like there's a firmness that happens. So, but pre-impact and post-impact, there should be a lot of elasticity and looseness. So at right, biomechanically, as you're getting closer to impact, there is a tensioning that happens in anticipation of the impact, and in order to keep the racket head stable. But in general, I think you guys know what I'm getting at. There needs to be like a looseness in the arm, a looseness in the wrist. The wrist needs to whip. And one of the ways that I found to get that is to not teach. I've talked about this a million times. You guys, if you're one of my students, I know a lot of my students and families are listening to this. You know I'm preaching to the choir here. You've heard this a lot, but the follow through, the traditional follow through, is killing forehands across this country. The traditional follow through where you go from low to high, and I know exactly how coaches teach it. And you maybe you step in. We'll talk about the footwork a little next. And you extend a little, and maybe you catch the racket out in front, or you follow through to your ear, or you wrap the follow through around your neck. You basically follow through low to high. You go your swing path low to high, and then you catch the racket. You follow through above to the top of the shoulder, to the neck. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. And it's very rarely taught well with suppleness and elasticity. For some reason, that cue, that teaching cue, is killing the looseness in the arm of so many players. And so I face a daily battle trying to unwork that, to try to unwind the tightness in the players' forehands that I see. It's a daily, weekly battle. Almost every player who comes to me from like a typical club around the country, obviously depends on the place. Very rarely do I see a kid with the arm relaxed, with a nice fluidity and a nice elasticity, and that is a huge issue when you're developing the forehand, because the best forehands are whip-like, and the arm is relatively loose. I mentioned that the tension varies in the arm, so as you're coming up to the impact, the arm will stiffen a little pre-impact. But basically, post-impact, there's also, when you wiper and you follow through, there's a lot, the looseness returns again. And in the pre-impact phase, there should be a lot of looseness, so you can get that lag and the snap through. It's either called the lag or snap, or like Rick Macy calls it, the flip. There should be a lot of, you have to create lag and whip in the arm pre-impact. and then there should be, and let's talk about post impact of the ball. There should be, I found the best way to try to develop looseness and elasticity in the arm is to go big on the windshield wiper finish, go big on the rotational finish. So that's where you make a big pronation at the end of the post impact, and you rotate your forearm. So there's a big internal shoulder rotation. Rick Macy would call that turning the doorknob. But I say, like, go big on that. You should exaggerate that with young kids. It should be this is radical for coaches who are steeped in traditional methodology, but go big on that. I have a socials friend from Russia. I forgot the dude's name. He's the top coach in Russia, but we exchanged a lot of videos, him and I. And he was a top ATP player as well. And he sent me some amazing videos of the way he teaches the forehand with extreme pronation and shoulder internal rotation. Basically, that's the windshield wipering action post impact, and so much wipering where you rotate the forearm and the shoulder that the racket is pointing directly down at the end of the backswing, rather than going up to the top of the shoulder. You rotate extreme down. And I agree with that. I think it's brilliant. It's unbelievable. I love that. It's so different, and the opposite of what most coaches learn here in the U.S., where we create so much stiffness and we create a locked arm. This is like a big thing for me, the forehand, and I'm going to spend, I think, a little more time on this subject because it's the forehand, as Tony Nadal says, the most important shot in the game. You might disagree with Uncle Tony. I might disagree a little bit too, because I know you're going to say serve and return. But the forehand now is if it's not the most important, it is the primary weapon of tennis. And if we have thousands and thousands of players around this country learning rudimentary forehands, because they're being taught in a way that creates a locked arm, stiff arm. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing that? And one of the ways that I found is to create elasticity and suppleness in the arm is to do this extreme wipering post impact. It helps a lot. The other thing you can do is you can just focus on where the follow through goes. If you can follow through lower, so the swing path will go usually high, low, rises up to the impact, then lifts and extends, and then you go, instead of lifting and extending and locking it into the shoulder or the ear, or where you wrap to your neck, at the end you go up and then over and then down, and try to finish with the racket dangling low. So the racket there should be like the absence of tension at the end of the forehand stroke. And if you go and check most American kids, check their tension level. I wish there was a meter, some way to measure it. But just go and feel the arm at the end, and that thing is so friggin' tight. For 90% of the kids that I see, they follow through, and at the end of the swing, there's so much tension in that arm, and they're gripping the racket very tightly, and they're forcing the weight of the racket up high at the end. I just think it's a disaster, and I see it 9 out of 10 kids probably, And a kid, once in a while, I get a kid from like a special, maybe from a top academy, or they had a coach who was a very high level coach. And they do it. They're very elastic, and their forehand looks to me like down the road their forehand could become a tremendous weapon. So this is a complex topic, but I tried to get into some of the little bit of the nitty gritty for those of you who like technique. I hope I didn't go too far into the weeds where I lost you guys, but I could probably do. I think I've done a whole show just on this topic, but it's just, I keep reiterating it because it's bothering me now. This is years later and nothing is changing. Like all the kids play the same forehand. I don't know if it's coming. It must be coming from maybe the red, orange, green curriculums. Thank you, red, orange. Whoever wrote the red, orange, green manual for coaches. Thank you very much. You create a lot of business for me. I appreciate it. But you are not helping those kids become the best they can be. I'll tell you that. You have any questions about the forehand, guys? See, we got a lot of viewers here. Let me know if you have any technical questions about it. I'm going to move on to, I think the next thing is the backhand. Oh, dear Lord. We're going to talk about the backhand a little bit and then talk about footwork. But basically, the forehand, just stop, guys. Just stop doing the follow through like the old way. Stop. Check. You have to look for the tension in the arm. Is there a lot of tension in the arm or not? And if you insist on teaching like the classic low to high swing with the finish above the shoulder, you can do it. You can do it, but there has to be a lot of looseness in the arm. You have to create the lag and snap. You have to get that flip going in the wrist. You have to use the wrist, and it has to be a loose low to high swing. It can't be like super tight. So that's the best advice I could give you is check the tension of the arm. So no matter what style you're going to do, if I can't convince you to go extreme on the wipering, I mean, we could spend the whole show talking about different backswings, like elbow first or like Rick Macy style backswing, like ATP backswing, or we could get into that too. But I'm just talking about how you generate looseness. And number one, I do a lot of manual manipulation with the player. I try to sounds kind of weird, but you go in there with your hands like a martial arts coach, and you try to physically loosen them up when they swing. We do a lot of shadowing. I do a lot of shadowing with the kids. I do a lot of stages where you have the kids swing slowly, staying loose, and then slowly progress to faster and faster, because there has to be a progression to help generate the looseness and the elasticity in the swing. Usually when players, what happens is a lot of kids, when they try to hit hard, they get tighter. Most kids make the big mistake, adults too, when they try to hit the ball hard. Everyone wants to hit the ball hard, but they don't understand that the best way to hit the ball better and harder is with a looser arm. But it doesn't feel right to most people because you feel like you lose control when you're too loose. Anyway, so the trick is to slowly, through progressions, teach a kid to be loose and to be whippy and elastic. And I developed a whole way to do that I think it works really well with some of the things that I mentioned. Physical manipulation, working a lot on what happens to the forearm post-impact, and then just helping the kids through feedback, helping them feel how much tension they're carrying in their shoulder and in their arm and their lower arm and in their wrist. Very important. So that to me is like a huge thing. I got to start right here. This is like a huge thing. Why can't we develop better forehands in this country? Not so much at the top level. I'm talking about go watch a junior varsity tennis match. Go watch a varsity tennis match in high school around this country. And it's just a technical disaster land. And that's because these are the kids that are going through red, orange, green, and they're getting shoddy, outdated coaching advice. They're being taught sort of traditional strokes. They're not being taught very good footwork. And then they all end up on JV and low-level varsity high school tennis. And it's a disaster. It's terrible, all those kids could look a lot better, have a lot better skills, play a lot better, fewer injuries. Because if you're tight with your swing, if you have problems with a tight block swing, you're creating more risk of injury because of the load you're putting on the body. And we'd have much just on a broad level, we'd have much better forehand technique across the. So Number two, you want to get into the backhand a little bit? I'm more obsessed with the the forehand is driving me crazy. Like the forehands that I'm seeing, it's driving me crazy. There's more to it. I won't take the whole show to talk about the forehand, but God, it's so bad. Backhand. The biggest issue with the backhand. So most people play with two hands. One issue is related to two hands is everyone's taught two hands, which is a mistake. There are a small percentage of kids who can do much better with a one hand, and we don't identify them anymore. We just teach all the kids at the at the club level, young kids. We teach them all two handers, and there's a bunch of kids in there, not a majority, a minority, who will play much better with a one hander, and we just box all the kids in, which is a mistake. But another issue is the stiffness and tension on the two-handed backhand. So coaches don't teach the two-hander like Jimmy Connors or Chris Evert used to hit it. You know, the two-hander, it hasn't changed as much in the last, like if you look at the way the forehand technique has evolved since, if you go decade by decade from the 70s, 80s, 90s to now, the forehand technique and like stances has those things have evolved tremendously, and you can see the way the technique has evolved, and we should teach that to young kids. Don't teach them the old way, teach them the new way. And then with the backhand, there's been a lot of evolution, but it's not as much as the forehand and not as dramatic. So in the backhand, the two-handed backhand, the main evolution has been like the lag and snap of the wrists, what the wrists are doing. If you have to look at it in high-speed video in slow motion, so you can see that the way the wrists are very relaxed and the way the wrists are basically flipping, as Rick Macy describes it. I'm a big Rick Macy fan, by the way. I studied with Rick, and I think he's fantastic. So he's a legend. And basically, the way the wrists have to be, they make like a little flip or like a little circle, little lag and snap, whatever you want to call it. That should be happening on the two-handed backhand. And again, I would probably say 90% of the kids that I see, that they are not using their wrist, for lack of a better way to describe it, properly. They're not generating very much topspin on, so they're not dropping the racket head at the right moment, and they're not making that little circle, that flip with the wrist on the two-handed backhand, and so the backhand looks tight, cramped, and not fluid, like lacking fluidity, and lacking whip. So it looks kind of like, instead of getting a blur when they swing, the backhand looks sort of like you can see the outline of the racket and the arms working. My mentor in Spain, Luis Bruguer, would say it looks the same speed. Like the backhand, when they're hitting it, it's kind of like the same speed, rather than changing speeds and getting a good acceleration, a good buildup of speed and whip in the racket head. The racket head is kind of looks kind of like the same speed throughout the swing, or it's slow motion, but it comes from the stiffness, the stiffness of the arms. And that, to me, on the two-hander is the biggest problem that I see. You see a lot of two-handers, and there's a minority that should be one hand. And then if you see a good two-hander, some kids get it by chance or by good coaching, but most of the kids are super tight. The contact points are usually late and behind them. This relates to positioning. I would say on both the forehand and backhand, you see a lot of tension in the body, in the arms, because of coach. For some reason, we spend a lot more time teaching the swing than teaching the positioning. And so this is more like a general critique or criticism of American coaching, where you have a lot of players who they've been taking lots of lessons, and they have bad contact points. They're actually in a bad position relating to the ball, and then they're very stiff as they swing. That's a major problem. That's something they do very, very well in Spain. One of the things, they clean up the positioning very well in Spain, which is why they have a lot of good players, even at the lower level, at the broad base, the grassroots level. They have a lot of players who play well. And I would say in the U.S., like when you start not at the high level, but when you start going down to the lower levels, like I mentioned, like JV or high school or lower level tournament players, that there's like a huge technical skills drop off. Like it's really bad. You drop off a cliff. And part of that is it's the movement, the technique of movement, the way the kids move. They don't receive the ball very well, so they spend a lot of time doing, practicing their stroke reproduction or repetition, but they're hitting the ball consistently late or behind them or too high or too low. They're not moving their feet well to receive the ball. And so that creates what I'm talking about. That's part of the problem with tension. It creates a lot of tension in the swing. So it's important to try to teach players to position well, like on the backhand or the forehand, so that they can swing more with more elasticity, more looseness, and that it will help them generate topspin and more effortless power rather than meeting the ball poorly, receiving the ball poorly, and then trying to hit it by forcing it with tension, by forcing it with tightness, and with trying. The word I use sometimes is muscling the ball. Like instead of trying to muscle the ball with bad contact points, you should try to be loose and fast and quick and whippy with the arms and the racket, but with the better contact point, which will actually give you more power and better spin if you do that the right way. And just most kids have no clue what I just said is from 9 out of 10 kids whom I see, they're clueless to this concept, of moving better, swinging more loosely, and meeting the ball, receiving the ball in a better place in relationship to the body. Like they have no clue what I'm talking about. And I just think, then I say to myself, well, how can this be? Like, how can so many players across the U.S. are being taught that? How can they be taught that way? I don't understand it. Closed stances and grounded shots. So this is related to the footwork, getting into the footwork and movement. Closed stances. For God's sake, guys, why do we teach only closed stances to young kids? So we have closed stance backhand, closed stance forehand. I mean, I have kids who've come to me, they've never learned an open stance. They've never learned a semi-open stance. They could be 12 or 13 years old, and for years the coach said to them, you gotta step into the ball and transfer your weight. Like if you go for a lesson and that's the crux of the lesson, like the heart of every lesson is step into the ball, transfer your weight. I mean, come on, you got there's a lot better teaching that can be done than just that, guys. That's pretty basic and really not that important anymore. The game is rotational. The game is becoming more and more airborne. The evolution of the tennis game has become more airborne, more rotational. I just wish coaches would acknowledge that and just understand that stepping into the ball is not a bad thing, necessarily. It's good to learn. You have to learn how to square up the stance. You have to learn how to step forward into shorter balls. But most of the game is so high speed now. The game is pushing players into the corners or the recesses of the court, and you have to have a really fantastic open stance and semi-open stance, and you're going to get in the air a lot. There's a lot of balls where you're going to get airborne, you're going to load and explode, leave the ground, and you have to learn how to do that with good balance. And I just think it's a shame that we force so many players, even 2022. Like it's not 1972 or 1982, it's 2022, and still a majority of the coaches and clubs around this country are teaching all the kids to step into the ball like totally old school. By the way, it creates stiffness. It creates a very linear swing. One of the things that I try to get with the modern swing shapes is more of a parabolic swing shape, which is like a circular swing shape, like a hook in boxing, rather than a straight punch. And we teach all these kids to step forward and punch straight ahead, very linear, create stiffness, and then we add those follow-throughs that I talked about that also kind of encourage stiffness and tightness. And what do you get? You get players who are don't adapt well to difficult balls. They don't move that well laterally or backwards. They don't defend that well. We don't teach them good open stands. And we have players who are very limited in their movement skills, and they don't receive the ball very well. They have tight swings and very linear swings. When the whole game has changed, the whole game is there's a lot of rotational elements to the ground stroke technique in terms of the hips. The stances are more and more open. The players are getting more and more airborne, consistently airborne. Obviously not every shot, but in many situations, players are getting more airborne, and we don't teach that. Nothing. We don't teach that. We teach the kids to stay on the ground. Stay on the ground. I have players who come to me. They say the coach said always be on the ground. Always, never leave the ground. Stay on the ground and step in. And if you think that's the best way to teach a young kid, I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you. If you're a diehard, like classic, classical method, tradition. I mean, tradition's got to change at some point. When the whole game's changing, at some point you got to wake up and change. Change with the world. Or you can stick your head in the sand, and in your club you can just teach it the way you want, the way it used to be. It's okay to teach some of those things, but you gotta support the closed stances and with good lateral stances, lateral movement, and open stances, and get the kids off the ground. That's where the game is. That's where the game's going. But when players are stuck on the ground and they usually don't learn to rotate their hips very well, so they don't get this nice parabolic swing shape, and they usually try to get power from other ways, like forcing, muscling the swing. But when you load a nice open stance and you explode and get airborne, the hips rotate well, that pulls the racket through quickly, and you can combine that with looseness and elasticity training like I was mentioning, and you can get this nice whippy elastic forehand that is really powerful, and the swing speed is fast, so you're generating a lot of energy but with less effort. And that's the whole goal of good technique, and which we don't teach any of that. We got the kids locked on the ground. We got the kids locked. Their arms are locked so they can hit the ball firmly, and they're following through here. And there's no way that foundation is going to generate. I mean, for 99% of the kids, that's not going to, down the road, that's just going to be, it's just going to be a failure, technical failure, technical inefficiency all the way through the junior years into high school and beyond. Most kids do not escape that. Occasionally you can start kids like that, and down the road, they'll start to develop more modern pro strokes. But that would be very worried. If I were a parent or a kid, if I was being taught that kind of technique at a young age, I think there's a high probability that you're going to end up with less success when you're older. You're going to have skills that aren't very good when you're older. There's the magical idea that later it's gonna evolve into more modern open stances and all that good stuff. Usually is that magic doesn't always happen down the road, and a lot of these kids just impossible to escape those technical habits that they have. Teach it more modern right away, right when the kids are young, so then they don't have those those difficult challenges when they're older, trying to overcome those years of repetition and the years of building stiffness. All right, what do we got here? Should we talk briefly about the serve? I've done whole shows on the serve. Let's do a couple topics on the serve. The idea where you put the racket on your back or in the back scratch, and then you kind of practice a lot of serves from there. Big problem. That's being taught to thousands and thousands of kids all over the country. I just think it's a disaster. I don't know who it came from. Maybe Dennis Vandermeer back in the day, or someone well-meaning coach thought it was a good idea to break down the serve and put the racket on the back. And sometimes I use that progression maybe to learn how to brush up and do spin, but not too much. You can't use it too much, because if you have kids serving from the back scratch or with the racket on their shoulder like a half serve. If you do too much of that, it gets locked in, and the players develop the worst habit of all, which is slowing down or stopping during the acceleration phase of the serve. So as you're dropping the racket and you have your power position, and as you're dropping the racket and going up to the ball, that should be very, very fast. That should be did I mention the word elastic and fluid? That should be quick. That should be like a whip. And when you park the racket on the shoulder or in the back scratch, and you teach young kids to do that week in and week out, well, you see that a lot in red ball and orange ball training curriculums. It's a disaster because those kids develop the habit of stopping here or getting stuck here, and they don't learn to go quickly through the back scratch position. And the other thing related to that, and I think I included that in the article here, is we don't teach the legs. So I think it's a huge mistake across the country. I cannot believe we don't teach jumping on the serve. Again, the serve is an airborne shot. The tennis technique at large has become more and more, techniques have become more and more airborne. The serve is it used to be you had to keep your feet on the ground when you serve. The serve is completely load and explode now, airborne, flying. And you can teach that to young kids really easily. I've done we've done a podcast on this. We can maybe link to it, or you can search through the archives for it. We've done a show on this where one of the easy things you can teach a young kid. It's not difficult at all, and they can learn this with good success. Is to just learn how to bend their knees and leave the ground. And that's one of the first things I'll teach any young kid who comes to me, learn how to serve. Learn how to use your legs, buddy. You bend your knees and you learn to jump, and then I teach them how to land gracefully and with balance. And that's a wonderful thing you can teach anyone. You can teach adults that too, but anyone who wants to learn how to serve. And then the magical thing there is you can take that young kid and you can try to develop their power position and their racket drop, and you can try to coordinate the timing of the racket drop and the acceleration phase with the legs, and you can try to get that sequence better, because as Rick Macy says, and as other analysts have said, I've been saying it for a long time now, is we have a big problem all across the country where we have players who will use their legs with the wrong timing or sequencing with the arm and the racket drop. So basically, most players are dropping the racket way too early, because of when they're young, they're taught to keep the racket there on their shoulder. Most players have a premature racket drop and acceleration, and then the legs come too late. So if you teach jumping early, you can actually start to solve. You can start to preemptively fix that issue that we know is a big problem for kids as they get older. You can start to work on the sequencing of the leg drive, try to get the legs firing and the legs driving the back scratch rather than the back scratch triggering the legs. You can start to get the legs to the explosion of the legs to trigger the back scratch and to help the acceleration phase of the arm. You can get that sequencing right at a young age, and that's like incredible if you can do that at a young age. And I think that's where we should be focusing on for young kids, not just parking the racket week after week and working on half motions. We should try to get the full motions going. Obviously, you have to sometimes segment the teaching and use some progressions, but I'm saying in a limited way. And don't let kids get too much muscle memory where they're getting used to parking the racket and slowing down the racket and stopping the racket in the back scratch. And teach kids to use their legs on the serve, because that's where you can start to get at the sequencing of the arm movement and the legs. That's a huge part of developing a good serve, the rhythm of the arm and compared, in relationship to what the legs are doing. And if you don't teach the legs for the first few years, you're missing out on a huge window of teaching opportunity there where you can get the sequencing right. Also, related to the serve, it's incredible to me that I don't want to say 9 out of 10, but maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 kids that I see have no spin serve. You know, they could be 7, 8, 9, 10, could be 11, 12, 13, 14, high school, no spin serve. So they've gone through years of lessons, and all they have is one serve. If you have only one serve, you're very limited tactically, and you're not going to be able to play your best tennis. So what are the serves that you need? You need to have a powerful serve, first serve, and you need to have a slice that you use on the deuce to open the court. So just simple tactics. You have to have a good sliding slice serve that opens the court. And then on the ad court, ideally, you have a good kick serve that opens the court on that side. So now you have these cool tactical options that you can do. You have your power serve, and then you have two open or angled serves. Spain, they call it abierto, like you open the court. You have serves that you use to open the court. But most of the kids that I see have one serve. And then their second serve is a slower version of that one serve. If you have a player like that, or if your coach is teaching that, crazy, you know, really bad development. Young kids should be taught spins early. Maybe they're not going to have huge spin, like a huge kick or really amazing slice yet, but they should be taught those skills early so that they start to develop the coordination and the muscle memory for that. And then as they get older, they can grow in to those serves and have a nice trifecta. You know, they can be older and have a good power serve, good slice, and a good kick, ideally. And those things need to be taught younger because it's hard to learn spin. It takes time. So if you start that work at 7 or 8 or 9, you get a big jump start on the serve development. And by the time the player is in their early teens, they have these all three of those things mastered, which is going to help them. And you can also start to teach kids some tactics, like how to open the court with the spin. Use the spin to open the court. And a lot of kids don't have a second serve. Biggest issue, I didn't mention this in the article, but I've talked about this a lot. The biggest issue with second serve is a deceleration. So young kids should not be allowed to decelerate on the second serve. Why do kids do that? Because they don't want to miss. So big goal, big target for young kids is to learn how to swing faster or as fast with the same amount of racket speed on their second serve as their first. And I would submit to you guys, 99% of juniors, certainly 9 out of 10 kids I see, they swing slower on their second serve than their first. They don't jump as much. They don't use as much energy from the legs, or they don't jump at all, and they swing slower. I mean, I have some of the best young kids in the country who train with me, and even they fall into that pitfall. So that's a big one with the serve. There's a bunch of things there with the serve. Movement patterns. Big issue that I see is around the U.S. Most of the kids whom I see, the coaches are teaching them to only move forward, to just basically stand on the baseline, right on top of the baseline usually, and try to attack every ball and move forward. And like the idea is that you have to go to the net to be a good player, which is total fallacy, because there are many great players who move backward, and sometimes not every person is meant to go to the net. You know, some players, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you know, some players are better off playing from the back. You know, not every player has to attack the net all the time, and not every player has to move forward to win. Some players win a lot moving backwards. Some players play better, they win a lot when they play good defense. And we teach, I can just combine these points, you know. We teach players to usually, primarily, only move forward, like forward movement skills. So on a technical side, we teach them forward stuff, stepping in, going to attack, going to go to the net with their footwork patterns. And we don't teach a lot of the reverse movements. In Spain, they teach a lot of the reverse movements. So they have very good defensive movements for the players, and the players are skilled moving back. And we don't teach that. So I have kids all the time come to me, and they play tennis in this little area. They stand right on the baseline hash mark, and they move a little bit left, a little bit right, and forward. And that's it. That's all they know how to move. If I ask them to move backwards, they look at me with a confused face, like they don't know what the hell I'm saying. Like, what do you mean move backwards? How do I do that? Why do I do it? Why should I do that? And that's another question. Like, why do you want me to move back? Because that relates to the tactical flaw that I see all across the country is we tell players, as I mentioned, they have to move to the net to be a good player. That's a fallacy. You don't have to move to the net. Is it sometimes good to move to the net? Yeah, you can go to the net and play a nice point like baseline, approach shot, volley. Can be really good. You can be very successful with that. But not every player does that. A lot of players like to defend, counter punch. Depends on the personality of the kid. A lot of players like to maybe play baseline and then look for like big weapon, like maybe a big forehand winner, like power baseline. There's nothing wrong with that either. Like not every player has to be like cookie cutter, all court. I play baseline, I get short ball, I go to net, I volley. Like not every point has to be like that. I mean, there's nothing. It's good if you want to play like that, but we shouldn't be telling kids that that's the only way to play. And there's a lot of good ways to play moving back. Defense should be part of the curriculum, not only technically. So all that stuff is really important. And we just tell the kids, stand on the baseline, take the ball early, move forward. If you're not moving forward, you lack courage. Like you're not smart, and you have fear. You're playing with fear. Or like a lot of coaches say, like if you're not moving forward and attacking the net, like basically you're a wuss. But it's not true. It's a myth. It's a fallacy. You moving back is very smart and very strategic sometimes, and we should respect when players play great defense. We always in this country we always congratulate, we always honor the players who attack, but we should lift up and support players who play when players play great defense. We should applaud that, and we should honor that. When a player like runs really well and grinds a guy down and then hits a passing shot, like we should applaud that. And a lot of times, or all across the country, I know this is true. We always give encouragement. We always applaud. We always honor and raise up the players who are hitting the attack or going for the volley. And that's a shame. Like in Spain, there's a lot of pride given, a lot of honor given to players who like hang back and never miss. Like it's a great honor. It's a great achievement to be able to play like that, and players are praised for that. And here in the U.S., I don't think we almost never we don't. If you hang back and play a patient point and wear somebody down, if you play a good defense, I think that's rarely applauded, rarely praised, and so the kids naturally like all start to want to play like a certain way, which I think is wrong. So think about that. And do I have one more? I think I have. Oh yes, I have the tactics. A couple more tactical things. Yeah, what a shame. Like it's so nice in Spain. Like a player can hang back and play defense, and the coach doesn't like yell at them to like go attack the net. Like some players don't always have to attack the net. Not every player has to attack the net. Every player is different. But we teach cookie cutter attack. So a couple of more tactical things related to the net. One of them is to approach. Like when we approach, I've had many students come to me and they say, my coach says I have to approach down the line, always. And my coach teaches me a slice approach. And also my coach teaches me to approach down the middle. To me, these are really big myths, like outdated dinosaur ideas, that you have to approach every ball down the line. But what if the guy has like a good shot on that side, like a good backhand or something? Like, should you approach to Djokovic's backhand down the line, or maybe go angle forehand and attack him there? just doesn't, it never made sense to teach players to always attack one way. When you do approach shots, I always tell kids, you need to, number one, think about the opponent's weaker side. So that's more important than approaching a certain way, is you try to find the opponent's weaker pass. And then, in addition to that, you have to mix up your approach shots. You can't always approach the same way. You have to, like, down the line is good, but also a good angle approach is good. A cross-court approach can be good, especially if it's to the weaker wing. But you have to mix it up because you can't let the other guy get a read on what you're going to do. But I mean, every year I have players come to me and say, oh, but I can't approach cross-court. My coach said I only approach down the line. And my coach told me to approaching down the middle or with a slice is not a good play anymore. Guys are too fast. Guys are too powerful. The racket technology and string technology is totally changed, and players can whip passing shots from anywhere. The old idea of like chipping down the middle and going in, or slicing down the line, or approaching always down the line, cover the line, react for the cross. I mean, it's very traditional advice that is it's not going to work as well in the way modern tennis is being played. It's not going to work as well. So try not to teach your players, or try not to let your players develop these thought patterns, these strategies that are also antiquated in the same way that the techniques that I mentioned earlier in the program are antiquated. There are another big one that I wrote about for the article is defense. Like when you play defense, there's probably more than just these few, but these are the few that were on my mind. But like when you play defense, defensive patterns, if you're allowed to play defense, because I know some coaches, like there's a very famous academy. Well, there's a very well-known coach in Texas who says that if you're not attacking, you are playing negative tennis. Like, so if you're just playing consistent tennis or defensive tennis, you're playing negative tennis. That the tennis is completely bad, basically. So he's labeled it negative. This academy is this good academy. They call it negative tennis. You may know who I'm talking about. A very well-respected coach. I'm sure these guys are good coaches, but they're only teaching one way to play the game. The only way to play positive tennis is to attack and go forward, which I think is big mistake, and not every player is going to play their best like that. So if you play steady and consistent, if you play defense, you're playing negative tennis. There's no positive in it at all. And this is the extreme philosophy of attack, extreme American attack philosophy that I disagree with. But if you are allowed to play defense, what do most coaches say? Defend down the line or cross court? Defend cross court. Always defend cross court. I mean, for the same reason, this is ludicrous to play always the same defensive ball. If you're on defense, you got to mix it up. Maybe play. What if you play cross court defense to the guy? The guy has an amazing forehand, and you play cross court topspin high defense to the forehand. It doesn't make any sense. In Spain, one of the first things I noticed in Spain is they play a lot of defense down the line, a lot of defense high to the backhand, for example, or whatever it is. But you got to mix up your defense. You got to mix up your approach shots. You can't have like fixed, rigid laws that you have to follow, like black and white, always approach here, always defend there. It's crazy. But all the time, I try to teach the defense to the players. I have to play cross court, right? Because like the net's lower, the court's a little longer, like, so I have to defend cross court, right? But no, not necessarily. You can play a nice, a very good, strong, aggressive defense down the line. Just adjust for the net, and you adjust for the length of the court. And it might be much better for you if you're playing that defense to where the other player doesn't expect it, and where the other player may have a weaker wing. So those are other examples of tactical things that I see that are antiquated, outdated, dinosaur. A lot of these things are coming from a game, a very different era. You have the tennis world used to be primarily played on grass. The racket and string technology used to be very different, and players that affects the the techniques that are being taught. It affects the footwork patterns and the way we teach court positioning, and it affects the tactics. So the game has changed a lot, and we need to try to evolve with the game. And I don't know if any of you will buy what I'm selling, but I believe in this strongly. I wanted to share it with you. I know some of you are big fans. You'll be like, yeah, but I was hoping to get maybe some viewers who are on the fence or teaching a little more traditional style, and maybe make you guys, especially if you're a coach, or if you're a parent, like if you're a parent, this is a good list to kind of like watch out for. Like, you bring your kid to a program. Like, I had many parents tell me they brought their kid to a program and they saw some of these things being taught. Like, that's not a good sign. I think you should be very wary, maybe run. If these things are being taught to your kids at your local club or program, and try to find somewhere where they're going to teach more evolved tennis, more modern tennis technique and tactics. And for coaches, I was hoping maybe, I know here's a secret, a lot of coaches listen to this program. And I know that because I can see who subscribes and who watches. And a lot of coaches are using the things that we talk about here to help improve their coaching, and to they take things they learn here and they use it back home with their students. If you're a coach listening and you teach a very traditional way, try to have an open mind. Try to think about what I'm saying, and try to take a step back from the way you were trained, the way you were taught, and just look at the game. Like, compare a video from 70s, 80s to 2020s now. Look at the way try to look, objectively at the way the technique has changed, the way tactical patterns are changing, and think about how you could teach kids some of these modern things in a safe and responsible way. And I think you would improve your coaching if you did that. Guys, it's been a great show. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Let me know any questions you have. As I mentioned, I'll be doing the email grab bag in future shows. But it's been my pleasure spending some time with you. I hope I didn't go too long here. It looks like a long program, but I guess there was a lot to say. But as always, God bless. I'll see you guys on the next program.